And Major Garrett joins us now from Washington with more on the Trump transition. And Major, I want to begin with the trip to Trump Tower yesterday by former Vice President Al Gore. What can you tell us about how the meeting came about between Gore and Ivanka Trump?
So I don't know exactly when this conversation between the two of them began or when Al Gore became convinced that Ivanka Trump was someone interested in the topic of climate change and carbon pollution regulation and greenhouse gases, because there's nothing that I remember or have gone back to check in Ivanka's public statements that indicates that at all, other than to say at the Republican National Convention she was a nonpartisan millennial. Now, maybe that's enough for Al Gore. Well, if you're a nonpartisan millennial, you must care about climate change and regulating carbon emissions that lead to greenhouse gases, which have been linked scientifically to the warming of the planet. So I'm not really sure how this all got together. What I do know, and what this transition has made abundantly clear, is President-elect Donald Trump will meet with anybody about anything, especially if you have a high profile, and sort of convey that he is important by your presence on his turf, Trump Tower. So I'm sure when Ivanka let the president-elect know that Gore was willing to come meet him at Trump Tower, why not? But let's be clear about a couple of things. Whatever Al Gore, Ivanka, and Donald Trump, the president-elect, discussed about climate change, anything that moves away from the Trump agenda, which is by far the most aggressive in terms of fossil fuel exploration, development, and exploitation in the last 30 years, would be a significant shift. I mean, Al Gore can maybe content himself to think Trump is going to move in a different direction, but Trump is way out, as they say, over his skis on this. He has promised coal miners in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere that they're going to get their jobs back, that he is going to dramatically reduce federal regulations dealing with coal exploration, production, and development, and make it less expensive for that coal to be mined and brought to market. He's going to do everything he can to accelerate fracking to find natural gas, which obviously competes with coal, makes that more problematic. Open up the continental shelf for oil exploration, dramatically increase permitting on federal lands, also for oil and natural gas exploitation. I mean, the entire Trump energy approach is all about fossil fuels, deeply skeptical of renewable energy or any federal subsidies to increase the market viability of renewable energy. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of ground they covered or how productive it was. Gore said the conversation will continue. It's going to have to, because President-elect Trump has identified an energy agenda that would in every way, shape, and form be hostile to the Al Gore approach to dealing with fossil fuels, climate change, and underlying energy production.
Yeah, one reason in your piece you mentioned that Joe Manchin's candidacy exists because he's a pro-coal lawmaker. The other news yesterday, meanwhile, Dr. Ben Carson being tapped to lead the Department of House and Urban Development, a much pilloried pick in the hours immediately following. What's been the transition team's then reaction to the reaction?
To be fair, pilloried on the Democratic side. Republican senators, generally speaking, okay with this, not raising very many concerns. But Democrats saying, look, what kind of qualifications does Ben Carson, a neurosurgeon, a world-renowned neurosurgeon, have for housing and urban development issues? The Trump transition team says, look, Ben Carson, through the campaign and afterwards, identified himself as someone interested in urban renewal in this country of a conservative kind, using tax breaks, using other methodologies, working with church communities and others to increase educational opportunities and economic opportunities in the inner city of America. And I remember when I toured Ferguson, Missouri with Ben Carson, still then a candidate, back last fall, well, in the fall of 2015, he said this really is a passion of his life, not well understood, not well publicized. He doesn't like to make a big deal out of it, but he was one of the very few Republican candidates. He might have been the only one to take up the invitation of Ferguson, Missouri community leaders to come there and spend an entire day driving around and meeting the community and learning about its underlying economic issues. So this is something that Carson has more than a passing interest in. As far as the Democratic reaction, as far as the transition team looks at it, it's perfect. It's right out of central casting. They want Democrats who they will portray as urbanite liberals, disinterested and indifferent to the plight of African Americans and Hispanic Americans in those inner cities, to complain about an African American man who is genuinely interested in this issue and, by the way, has very deep ties and resonant following among evangelical Christians, white and black, in this country. Politically, the transition team considers this something that is expected and one that they will try to exploit.
I want to get you out of here on this one. And some comments made yesterday by Vice President Joe Biden to a group of reporters about 2020. Take a listen.
I'm going to run in 2020. For what? But for president. What the hell, man? Anyway.
We're going to run with that, sir, you know. You dropped that.
That's okay. That's okay.
Just to be clear, are you kidding about running for president in 2020?
I'm not committing not to run. I'm not committing to anything. I learned a long time ago, fate has a strange way of intervening.
Again, if you couldn't quite make it out, the vice president not committing to the fact that he may have been joking when he tossed his hat into the ring for 2020. What do you make of it?
Well, I think the most operative phrase there is "what the hell." I think that sums up a Democratic mindset right now after the very surprising loss by Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump. It is rather a party that is somewhat adrift in terms of what its future is and who its future leaders are. One of the underlying realities for Democrats, not named Barack Obama, is the last 6 years have been abysmal for that party. You look at the losses, the concentrated losses, more than 60 seats in the House of Representatives, nearly a dozen, if not more, seats in the United States Senate, the loss of many governorships, the loss of many state legislatures. I believe there are 978 Republicans elected to state legislatures in the last 6 years. I mean, the numbers moving against Democrats in the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and at the state legislative and gubernatorial level have been profound. This is a party that doesn't have a deep, young bench of future leaders. And when Joe Biden says 4 years from now, when he would be in his mid-70s, he thinks he's the new face or a face for a new Democratic Party, that tells you something about where the Democratic Party is and the difficulties it's going to have in the near future assembling alternatives to this older generation of leaders and trying to get newer ones to emerge.
Yeah, we saw questions with the re-election of Nancy Pelosi just last week.
On that very topic.
Yeah, questions still to be answered, perhaps for the next 40 years plus. Major Garrett there in Washington. As always, we appreciate it.
Sure.